I'm going to try and pull together some of the learning from the first two sessions and some of the themes that came out from that. And I think, the whole thing is coming about 5 years after the first roundtable on resilience, which was also held here in Dublin. The opening remarks at the time committed us to try to translate some of the fine words that were being spoken at the time into more practical results. And we have heard how progress has been made on some of these areas, but not so much in others. As Rory de Burke reiterated this morning, we still need to make sure we act and that there is so much more to be done, especially as we focus on hunger and continue to face the worst humanitarian crisis since the Second World War. Throughout, we heard the importance of addressing inequalities and how pockets of human deprivation are hidden within national figures. I don't think that's anything new. I mean, that was the same thing that we were hearing 5 years ago. And also the importance of building on what's already there. Again, something that's not particularly new. We did hear important contributions about the need to look at resilience at different levels, at individual, household and extended family, community, local economy, national level, and evidence put forward from the experiences of Kenya, Ethiopia, Chad, South Sudan, Somalia, Pakistan, and many more countries as well. Challenges around the lack of data and information and the lack of a coherent plan, and the challenge of nobody remembering what had been done in the past. And I think this is a bit disheartening. There's very little record of what was done 5 years before, and quite often we're repeating the same mistakes over and over. But to focus a little bit on what we have learned, and I think what is quite apparent is we have learned about just how important it is to bridge the gap between short-term humanitarian needs and longer-term, more sustainable development, and the benefits of multi-year financing to make people more resilient. Simon mentioned the importance of realising that a 1 or 2 year project will not help build resilience, and I think we saw that as well with the findings from Chad. That after 2 or 3 years of the research, we were getting a little bit worried, and after 3 years, we started to see something approaching an impact that we were looking for. Jeremy spoke about the humanitarian development nexus and the importance of the focus on fragile states, and a particularly promising point that I think has been coming out in a number of presentations is the ability of government to scale up and to utilise their own government systems, such as the social protection systems in Ethiopia and Kenya. Michelle highlighted also how Irish Aid is encouraging us, the Irish agencies, to break down the silos between the humanitarian and development work, and what a kind of a forward-looking approach that is. We also heard, and albeit not for the first time, how important it is to improve our understanding of the problem and what helps people to cope. Opportunities, family linkages in the cities, movement and personal factors. Anastasia underlined the importance of learning from communities. Pat Gibbons re-emphasised the need for localisation and building up of local knowledge. And I suppose we're beginning to see some of the results from doing that and some of the work that was presented. A lot of the discussion this morning was around the nutritional impact of an integrated set of interventions. Anastasia showed the work on that from Goshbeda, Chad, Camilla's presentation from South Sudan on what works. It's quite apparent that an integrated set of interventions does bring about some achievement, but it's difficult to break down which bits are working and having the achievements we are claiming. But again, it seems clear that breaking down the silos between health and education and nutrition seems to be the way to go forward with this. But as often is the case, as we find some answers, we get more questions and challenges revealed. We heard about some individual actions have worked, such as water and nutritional information. We've also heard about the need for a better understanding of the impact of having a clear plan around targeting and coordination. But what this underlines is the need for closer work between NGOs, both national and local, donors, researchers, government, and bringing about different ways of working between the different areas. Interestingly, I didn't hear anybody mention the private sector, or not much anyway, in the discussions today. And I'm sure that's something that we do need to even look into more and understand better. you know, one of the things is around better facilitating the two-way relationship between scientific research and technological innovation, and partnerships and how important they are to make various things work. There's also the warning for NGOs of straying too far away out of not so much our comfort zone, but our own areas of expertise, and being careful of not getting lost down the rabbit hole of measuring resilience, and that nutrition seems to work quite well as a proxy, at least from some of the way that it was presented. We heard very much about how resilience is very much about empowerment and building people's control of decision making, but we need to really look into that in much more detail. Rupa outlined the importance of addressing inequality, as did a number of the other speakers, and the importance of understanding intersectionality. And while we all agree that structural inequalities that create and sustain poverty and vulnerability is addressing these is a crucial precondition to building resilience, it seems we still need to do more on examining these and understanding how we can address them better. Kwan and Anya both talked about women's agency and political representation and how essential these are. And Anya raised the key question as to the extent that men are overburdened and women are under-resourced in their battle to build resilient communities. Variability, and Saverio talked about the pastoralist development and how some systems are designed to take advantage of these. One of the key lessons that came from that is understanding, or the need to understand more, the linkages. That it's not urban or rural, that it's not pastoralists living in a particular area, but it's understanding the entire area. And back to Simon's initial comment about local economies. We also realized, or it was pointed out, that sometimes, yes, we might be trying to measure the wrong things, and how easy it is to misunderstand that. We could say that cash programs don't work, but actually what we're really saying is cash programs don't have a very clear impact on a certain number of nutritional outcomes that perhaps we never set off to address in the first place, and that we need to be more careful about this. Other things that jumped out that we need to have perhaps a bit more focus on as we learn more is about the whole adaptive social safety net programs and how they're building resilience. And back to the whole question of urban issues and understanding the complex nature of urban societies. Much of what we're talking about does relate to rural areas, but we do need to understand the urban context more without trotting out the figures of 54% or the greater population is now living in urban areas. And yet we still know very little about the responses there. That's my take on the first two sessions. Ali will give a quick run through and try to capture everything that came from the third session this afternoon.
Okay, so a whistle-stop tour through the very rich conversation we've just had this afternoon, and an attempt to draw out some key themes. So we were grappling with the policy and funding implications of resilience and teasing out some of the roles of different actors in creating an enabling environment to allow resilience building to flourish. Also looking at how what has emerged from our programming in terms of learning can inform policy development. So one of the things we've heard a number of times has been around kind of the community-centeredness of resilience and around the importance of listening to communities themselves and recognising their inherent resilience. So that's about recognising our own place within the system and building on supporting what's working rather than trying to impose from the outside. In policy terms, part of what that means is pressing for communities to be involved in the development of policy and plans at all levels. And we heard from Maurice earlier about some of the mechanisms for the inclusions of communities in the SDGs and the COP and the need to push these forward. But this without prejudging the priorities or perspectives of the people with whom we work. This connects to another key theme which we've heard a lot about today, strengthening governance structures and capacity. So if people's priorities are to be addressed in a sustainable way, it's absolutely crucial to look at the governance challenge. We heard this morning from Jeremy about the progress that has arisen working with devolved government structures in a relatively stable context like Kenya. But we've also heard repeatedly about the need to engage in the more difficult business of strengthening structures in fragile contexts. As Nicola pointed out earlier, there's a need to deploy different strategies depending on context, and again, to be smart about the role of different actors. And this morning we were given the example of Chad, where donors and NGOs are working at different levels. So donors have a key role to support the sustainability of the national level early warning system, while there is a role for NGOs to strengthen the capacity of civil servants to ensure that that early warning system is community informed. Climate change has reared its ugly head throughout our discussions. There's a recognition that climate change is a key part of the new reality we're dealing with an increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters, and so it needs to be central to our understanding of resilience. So in policy terms, we need to see coherence between the implementation of resilience commitments and the different frameworks, including the Paris Agreement. And in funding terms, we need to make current funding smarter. So there's a real risk of our investments being wasted unless you take into account the climate dimension. Much more was spoken this afternoon about the humanitarian development nexus. And we recognise the commitments that were made on that at the World Humanitarian Summit and how that's being taken forward with a new way of working. In part, it's about funding, of course, and as we heard this afternoon, there's a need for funding which takes a longer-term vision, and we heard from Roger and Nicole about areas such as linking humanitarian and development streams of funding and longer-term and more flexible funding. But it's also about finding ways to support humanitarian programs which recognise and dovetail with development programs and vice versa. And in areas of recurring humanitarian need, including many of the contexts we've been talking about today, that's crucial. So perhaps one final overarching point that was made this afternoon, and this is one of the challenges that Simon set to us. We know that resilience is about systems, and yes, we have a role to play. All of the different actors in this room and many others have a role to play. But our resilience building efforts exist within a system, and we need to approach the business of resilience building without hubris and without imposing preconceptions, and in developing a much more detailed understanding of the local context.
Well, it's been an absolutely fascinating day, and it was started off very robustly for us by Simon, and he reminded us that we should focus on the extended family. Well, the Alliance indeed is such a thing. It is an extended family of organisations, themselves very strong families, but between us, we believe that by sharing our experience and knowledge on the ground between us, but importantly also with others, makes us stronger in delivery and impact. And that was what today was about. Today was a learning roundtable, and the idea was a simple one. It was to try and look at the evidence of what we've actually done on resilience programming in the last 5 years, since this became such a hot and trendy topic, and to see where we have come and what are the gaps in what we know in order to define our future directions. And amazingly, I think that's what we've done. I think we've had a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I myself have learned a huge amount, and I know from talking to many of you in the breaks that you feel the same. We've had a huge richness of perspectives, and I know that in any room of this kind, we can raise the criticism about all of the perspectives that we lack. We couldn't agree more. There's so much more we could have heard. There's so many more people we could have heard from. And that's why, I'm happy to tell you that this is just one in a series of roundtables that we'll be holding over the next 3 years, we hope, in other member state capitals in the EU. And we would love to hear your ideas about the kinds of topics that we should go more into depth about how we can help build community resilience in those roundtables. So, I think we've heard a lot of suggestions from our speakers and our rapporteurs today around, for example, engagement with the private sector, what it really means to build resilience in very fragile settings. So I think, we have our work cut out for us. But my job here is really just to thank you for these incredibly lively and most importantly, evidence-driven inputs, and to say that this is, just part of a learning journey that we're very happy to be on with all of you. So I'm simply going to finish by saying that the reason we kept you so cold is because we believe you're going to be more intellectually resilient if you're a little bit freezing. So, you know, I hope that it did actually work and that you're not going to go home and get sick. In order to warm you up on your way home, there will be coffee and tea when we finish. We hope you'll be able to join us for our final little warm-up and tell us your impressions of the day and what you think we should be speaking about next time. And finally, I just want to extend a huge thanks to a large list of very important people. First of all of our speakers and panelists, including those who joined us by video. It made a huge difference to have their perspectives. It wouldn't have been the same without, but you all brought something very special and unique and evidence-based, so that's hugely appreciated. We really appreciate all of you participants for coming. We know this is a horrible time of year to come to an event. You all needed to stay at home and do all of that pre-Christmas stuff, and you came here to spend the day with us, and we really appreciate it. I want to extend an enormous thanks to our organising team. You all know that it's not a mean feat to pull together an event like this, and an awful lot of people have been part of a very extended family effort to bring this together. And finally, I want to say a huge thanks to our bold and brave moderator, Margaret, who tries to pretend that she doesn't know anything about these topics, but I think you can tell from how she moderated that she knows an enormous amount and is also a passionate supporter of our work. So I can't imagine anybody better to have guided us through this day. So with that, thank you. Thank you very much.